right, good morning, happy Friday. So I had a question. Actually, this has come up quite a few times. How do I build trusses in ArchiCAD? I want to be able to show my framing package in section, show 3D axon, whatever it is. You want to actually show the manufactured truss in your model. So here I actually have four examples of how we could build these trusses. Hugely different ways. Each has their own advantage, each has their own disadvantage, and I'm going to run through them individually. So the first one down here at the bottom, it's actually an object. If I look over here in the info box, I see the object tool. The way that that was built is I drafted out with polylines the truss profile that I need, and select those polylines in the plan view. Go to document, not document, go to design, and roof extra, design extras, truss maker, and create truss. From here you get this dialog that asks what the profile needs to be: timber, hollow, or steel profile. The attributes of that, so layer, surface, line type, height to story, pen, the truss profile, and that gives you a little cross-section diagram, and then the preview plan right here. Once you've created that truss, there is also, under that same design extras, there's an edit truss option. Oh, sorry, apologies there. We have to actually select the truss in question. Let me grab the correct one right here. Edit truss. Oh, in elevation apparently. It's pretty specific. I'll try this again. Continue editing. And then I can actually edit the elements that were used to generate that truss. So you don't have to necessarily hang on to that line work. I can then go back in and add stuff back in if that truss needed to be something different. And from there I can essentially redo the same thing. So the only thing that edit truss does is it allows you to avoid having to redraft, retrace that, so you can go back through and create a new truss from that. Overwrite it, and should update in every instance. So if you do need to make a change, you can make a change using the edit truss. The important thing to note about this option is that the sizing of these elements is based on the center of those chords. Additionally, each member is limited to the unique size of it. So if you needed a thicker rafter tail, you would have to actually offset this rafter tail line down 2 inches, for example, and save that as an additional piece, and it gets kind of sloppy. You can see the junctions on this don't look all tidy and nice. Also, the only option for the end conditions of this is perpendicular to the slope, so you can't have any custom rafter tails or anything with the truss maker. The next option up, also using objects, but not custom created objects. This is from the collection of objects in the ArchiCAD library under wood and plastic and roof construction. There are collar beams, there are rafters, there are struts, struts with vertical and horizontal, horizontal and vertical, purlins. Basically, this would be useful for more of a stick frame application. The rafter tails do give you options for rafter end angle, but there's no varying degree of how thick these are or how custom these are. Additionally, you can see that if I zoom in on this, the rafter has to have a bird's mouth. Setting that to a minimum slope, you can get it kind of tidy. Again, I didn't spend too much time fussing with this. This is a really kind of fussy way to model roof framing. Whether you're doing a stick built or a truss package, this can be really tedious and fussy to get this modeled out with these elements, because you don't have the edit functions. You can't extend, split, or even edit the truss as a whole. You have to edit each individual subpart of that truss. So that part is, this is probably one of the more tedious options. Better than using these objects, in my opinion, is to use beams. Whether it's beams, a combination of beams and columns, or all beams, something like this. works really well for modeling a truss package. It does mean that these are individual beams as opposed to this option, which gives you a single truss. But what you can do with that, if I grab my beams here, you can see I've got another beam option there. What I can do with those beams is I can go to File, Libraries and Objects, Save Selection as Object, and essentially unify those into a single truss. Unlike the truss editor, I don't have the option, just bump that up a bit, I don't have the option to go back and retain these pieces or pull these pieces out of the truss that was saved. So you would have to create and essentially retain the beams on a hidden layer if you ever needed to go back through and edit it. But this is a great option. It's a perfectly viable option for dropping in trusses, especially if you're just tracing out shop drawings. It works really well. You also have the option, because they're beams, to include segments, so your rafter tails can actually be different. You can even edit them sort of on the fly. If you're using the live beams, you can use the pet palette and start playing around with some of these cuts, these thicknesses, the connections between them. Adding a new strut in like we did down here is pretty simple. You can just literally mirror it across an axis, mirror copy. Again, using the pet palette, I can change the slope, change the extrusion, change the angle of all of these connections. So using beams, you can actually sort of almost on the fly model these up. If you have one beam working in your plan view, you can start adding and copying and mirroring and rotating, or not really rotating, but anyway, you get the idea. You can start building these trusses out in a section view directly. And if you underlay the shop drawings, you can get those lined up perfectly. And because it's a beam, it's based on that reference line extrusion, not based on the center of chord, which is always really tricky to figure out the truss maker to get that to work. And if I need to update the truss in the model, if I decide to save it as an object, you just go back to plan view and save over the top of the other one, just like we did with the truss maker. The fourth option here is also a very popular one, using the beam tool. What you can do is actually model the trusses using fills in the profile manager. That profile can get applied to a beam. The thing about this option, if we look at this in floor plan, let's see where we're at here, that profile is actually an extrusion of a beam that's 1.5 inches long. Because of this, I've seen this particular option get a little bit sideways if you're doing IFC coordination or saving out 3D models for consultants. This wants to be a beam that's an extrusion along this length, and depending on how it's classified and how it translates through, I've seen them either not show up at all or show up incorrectly because of their sort of perpendicular extrusion. But as far as basic modeling goes, there are ways to work around that with IFC translators. As far as basic modeling goes, this is a great way to just drop a beam in and start extruding it out. Oops, sorry, this one right here. Additionally, if I look at what I've done with this beam, I've added a few hotspots in here, and you can see what that does right away. So the hotspot right here, for example, in section adds a hotspot right here so it can sit right on the plate. Because I'm drafting it out with fills, there is no centerline edge line. It is what the fill represents as the extrusion. If I decide that I want to change this rafter tail, it's as simple as going in and editing the profile here, which again, this is perpendicular, but maybe it needs to extend down vertical to that point. Maybe I need a radius or something like that on here. That again. There we go. So something like that, and if I save and close, that's going to update in all instances of that profile. Yeah, there we go. Sorry, it's inverted from where the profile is here. That's just a matter of whether you drew the beam from left to right or right to left. But it would update every instance of that profile. So all of your truss profiles can hypothetically, theoretically, be managed within the profile manager in ArchiCAD. So those are 4 options on how to model trusses. I'm sure there are plenty of additional options that I didn't even think about or didn't touch on. So go ahead and let me know if there are other ways that you prefer to model trusses.